Good morning. This is Vicki Haddock joining you live for our fireside chat this week. And looking forward to having our conversation here and just getting the camera adjusted correctly here. So I welcome Danny in our Zoom room and all those who might be joining us live on Facebook. And so the cool thing is we get to do this live stream two ways, where it's live on Facebook, but also we're also in a private Zoom room so that anybody who's in the private Zoom room can hang around afterwards if they like and chat a little bit more. So happy to be with you this Sunday morning. Where I live in Nebraska, it's definitely fall and lost a lot of the leaves on the trees behind me, and it's just a cool, beautiful morning here. So wanted to talk to you this week about designing your future fearlessly. And the concepts I'm going to share with you today, they can be used for either a project that you have coming up that you're working on, or your next 3 to 5 years down the road. So it can work both ways. You can use it for many small things. You might even use these techniques to design how you want your family to operate. What's the ideal time that you'd like to spend with your family, and what would that time look like? So just some opportunities of how you can use this information. And I guess it's not even just information, it's like living experience that you can create. We live in a world where, the United States is one of the most rich nations in the world. We don't lack or want for much of anything, yet a lot of the time we have this significant dis-ease, unrest, discontentment in our soul that is very pervasive. And so we have to take a little bit of time to be comfortable with that, to explore, like, where is that coming from? What's the root of it? And a lot of times the things that are happening in our life are not in line with who we are as an authentic person inside. We're not taught a lot about how to look at what is important and authentic for us and then create that in our lives. What we're taught and what our kids are taught are, go to school, get good grades in your classes, go to college so you can get a good job that pays good, that has a 401k, that has insurance. And while we know all of those things are somewhat important in our society, sometimes we place a little too much importance on them, and they don't place any conversation on what's valuable, what is going to really fit the gifts and talents of that individual. So I just want to share a little bit of my own journey with this as I came to understand that where I was at in life wasn't where I wanted to be, and then how I designed that future forward. And I also added the word in there, fearlessly designing that future forward, because we face a lot of fear in our world. And we're going to talk about that a little bit as well. So 7 years ago, I found myself in a space as a single mom. For all intents and purposes, we were doing well as a family. I had learned how to manage single parenting and keep my kids on track and keep myself on track and balance life and work. But what I was finding is that increasingly with my job, I was more committed in the evenings to different functions, and it was becoming a very it was taking away time from my family. It was taking away time from what I really sensed, that there was something else in life greater for me. And so I knew that I had to create space in my life to figure out what that next step was for me. And I really became so firmly convinced of that that I began looking for opportunities and ways to create physical, like, space in my life. So that led actually to a change, a move for us, where we moved to a new town, and I stayed with the same company I worked with, but I took on a new role. And that new role actually allowed me more space in the evenings to be able to, one, dedicate to parenting, and two, to just open up some time for me to look inward and see what was it that I needed in my life to shape the future. And I knew that I had a lot to offer for people who were looking and seeking their own path in life. I knew that in the business world, I had done an excellent job of creating teams that worked well together, and safe teams. I was in the waste business, so safety was always number one key aspect, making sure everybody went home safe every night. So when I started this journey of this move and this time, and then it opened up this space to say, okay, what's next for me? And during that time, I came across some a podcast, actually, that was about a guy who ran an online business, and he was selling products. And wow, it just really, like, the lifestyle just so appealed to me, and I already loved to travel. And so I got to thinking, well, what if I could create a business where I had a little bit more flexibility and freedom of time and location that wasn't necessarily kept me tied to one physical location. And that was very appealing. And so as I continued to listen to this gentleman's podcast, Johnny FD is his name. If anyone wants to look him up, if anybody's interested in this, you can look him up and listen to his podcast called Travel Like a Boss. And so one of the first ventures or things I did is I tried an online store. And you know what? It was a pretty cool thing. I learned that that is a really awesome opportunity to way to be able to earn income. And I had my store up and running well, and it was profitable. And the next point I realized is it didn't suit me as a person. It was a valid way to earn a living. It was a valid way to run a business, but it was missing the people connection that I needed. And I knew that I was gifted in helping people move forward on their journeys. So I thought, you know what? This has been a good learning lesson, a good experience, but I'm going to move on from that to something else. So I began a searching process, and there was about a year in there where I really just kind of sat quietly and, like, okay, I'm just looking for what that thing is that's going to come to me. And about that time, I met a coach. Dr. D was her name, Dr. Denise Trudeau Pascas. And she really helped shape the next step of my journey by introducing me to what a life and business coach was, and the impact and the power that they could have in a person's life. And that began my shaping of the next step of my journey. What I began to realize and understand is that our brains are like a computer, or maybe like a cell phone. You know, we hold this powerful digital device in our hands, and that powerful digital device can do so many things. We can kind of keep our life organized through this. And our brains are much similar. We have a subconscious operating system that whatever is in that subconscious operating system, that's kind of what we're going to be living out in life. And a lot of things were put into that operating system at a young age for us that maybe are not helpful, are not true, and are not what we are manifesting things that we really don't want in our life. So the first opportunity we have here is to start looking at what is that operating system in our brain and how do we give it new instructions and a new picture. And we really have two operating systems going on at the same time. One is our mind, or what we might also call the ego. So if you were quiet for just a moment and listened, we'll just pause for a moment. What do you hear? Do you hear chatter going on? You might catch your thinking going, I'm wasting time watching this, or um, why is she not talking? What's going on? Is she going to talk again? You might be hearing all sorts of things. And that is the voice of your mind. And we have to separate that from who we are as a person, because the voice of our mind is not us as a person. And until we learn that, until we learn how to separate that voice from who we are, we can actually get really caught up in the things that that voice is saying and causing us to question things, causing us to doubt things. And that voice is really there kind of speaking from our experiences from the past, maybe sometimes some value in it, helping us to try to think through possibilities in the future. But most of all, that voice is there casting fear, doubt, and insecurity. And it steals our happiness and our joy. So, what we can do is learn to tune in from our heart space. I'm going to mute just a moment because I'm going to cough here. Okay, I'm on the tail end of recovering from some type of a bug. So what we can learn to do is tune in to our heart space and our intuition. You might recognize that as the gut feeling in your stomach, the quiet little voice that bubbles up from your heart. And if you stop and think, there's probably times in your life where you listened to that voice and heard that voice, but maybe didn't do what it said. And then later on realize, wow, I should have listened to that voice. So that is the voice that is our true North Star, always guiding us to what is in the best interest of ourselves and our lives. The mind is the voice that can really get us steered off track. So it's important to distinguish between those two things. And so then we talk about mindset. The things that the ego mind brings forward to us surrounding fear. I want to just pause and give you a couple little acronyms for fear. One is false evidence appearing real. Okay, it's not true, but somehow it looks very real in the moment. It can also stand for finding evidence against reality. It's another one. Or failure, an acronym for failure is first attempt in learning, you are enough. And then another reframe, if we could just switch to replacing failure with the word feedback to say, failure in our life is not succeeding. It's just feedback, encouraging us to go either continue going forward, or maybe we need to make an adjustment and go in a different direction. So those are two important things that help us to understand that the voice of the mind is not necessarily giving you correct and good information. So it's always good to question what the mind is saying. A great tool for releasing these thoughts that come into our mind. So we can learn how to watch them like on a conveyor belt, like come in and pass through and go out. And we don't have to like get engaged in them and start talking back to them and have a conversation with them. If you're having a conversation with that voice in your mind, which I've been there, I've done that, but that's not productive. So you can kind of separate that, make that voice into like a little gremlin sitting next to you on the couch, and then listen from that perspective and see if you want that gremlin to stay around very long. Um, you can also do what we call a swish, where you actually just like put that thought on a coin mentally and pop it out of your world. So the important thing is that we don't give credible value to that information coming in through the mind. Now the heart. So the heart was steering me in a different direction. And when I learned about coaching and life coaching and business coaching and the power it can make in people's lives, and then saw the power of the change that it made in my own life, my heart said, that's where you need to be. So then I began using a tool called visioning. There's a lot written about visioning out there. Athletes use it. They use it to practice. And what we know is that the same neurons in the brain fire when you imagine yourself doing something as when you're actually doing it. Now, the cool thing is when you're imagining it, you can shape that to look any way that you want it to. So that's cool. It can be, you can perfectly design the components of your future life in your mind's eye. Now, that is using your mind and your thinking capacity for a positive use. And what that does is you develop those pictures, is it actually starts to create new set of directions and a new map that goes to your subconscious. And that is super, super powerful. We're going to pause just a minute again. So that map, there's a couple ways that you can create that map. You probably have heard about a vision board. A vision board can be very powerful. It's not the tool that I found most powerful for myself, but I know other people who've done great with it. I've used a little bit different version of the vision board. One is a mind movie, where you actually can put together a little short movie about what you want to see in your life. The other is a mind map or a focus wheel. I'll post a link to a cool mind map video when we're done here. I'll post that link below. And it's a 5-minute video that's really cool about mind mapping. And then a focus wheel is also another tool. And it's just a little wheel you draw on paper and you put into the different sections of it. Like, what do you want to see in your financial world? What do you want to see in your career world? What do you want to see in your family and relationships world? And you put those things down in there. And so when we put those things down, it's cool because we can also put a date to it. And a date is what our brain just like really locks onto and says, okay, that's a new set of instructions that you've sent to my subconscious. And now I'm going to take that as a directive, as marching orders, and I'm going to actually create that in your life. So this is pretty cool. I did a mind movie over Christmas break last year. So Christmas break of 2018, I created a mind movie. It was 3 minutes long, set to a song, because when we imagine and when we use visualization, we want it to be audible, something that we can hear. We want it to be visual, something we can see. And then we want to really connect to the emotion of what is happening. So in this mind movie, I put some cool things in there. Some about travel, some about friends, some about being able to really relax fully and completely, some about business, some about the impact that I wanted to see on people's lives. And those things, I watched that Mind movie, and you know what? I probably watched it a couple times a day at first, and then here and there, and then probably by the end of January, I probably totally, completely forgot about it and hadn't watched it. And so I ran across my Mind movie this week as I was preparing for another speech that I'm giving this week, and I watched it, and I almost like fell off my chair because a couple of the images in that Mind movie were so like they were like almost perfect recreations of things that I have experienced this summer and this fall. And so I had to stop and look at, and one of them, the pictures was the image of a person standing looking out at this beautiful mountain scene. Not a mountain scene like anything like I'd seen before, and I had no idea even where that mountain scene was at. Well, I have a picture of me standing in Norway this summer looking out over a mountain scene that is almost identical to that picture. It just so identical that it's like, oh my gosh. And then a couple more scenarios where I have now have like pictures where I can say, oh my gosh, there are the pictures that to prove that those things are becoming a reality. And then my focus wheel. So the last 3 years, I've done a focus wheel and a mind map kind of combo together. And when I look back at those, almost everything either has happened or is in the process of happening. And that's pretty darn cool, because a lot of times in life we feel powerless to influence or change or shift our reality. But this is giving us proof that we do have the ability to shift our reality. So, what do you do once you have that really powerful vision in place of what you want your reality to look like? Well, the one important thing is to really freeze those images in your mind's eye and snapshots that your brain can just continually refer back to. We know, someone in my class I was in yesterday used this awesome analogy of a sled going down a hill. Liken that to our brains. So when you first imagine this new image, that's like a sled going down a hill for the very first time on a perfectly snowy bank, clear bank, nobody's ever walked on it, touched on, and then a sled goes down the hill. That creates a track and an indentation in the snow. That's like watching your vision for the first time. Now, every time you see that vision again, is like that sled going down the hill, creating a deeper and a deeper and a deeper track till all of a sudden now your sled automatically follows that track. And then if you continue to do that, the sled just on its own goes down. Now, what's happening to the old sled tracks, maybe somewhere else on the mountain, while we're going down this new one? It probably has new snow falling in it, or it's melting, it's disappearing. When it doesn't get used, it disappears. And that is exactly like our mental pathways in our brain. So those old unhelpful things that we used to do, when we're no longer doing them, those neural networks start to break down and to go away. And then eventually, the longer we don't use them, they'll disappear. But we've also now created this new powerful track that's pulling our life forward. So literally, we were being pulled to our future versus pulled from our past, which is pretty awesome stuff. And so then when we know what our future is that we're going to, we have to look at, what does that mean we need to shift in our life? Do we need to do some research on how to accomplish that? Do we need to investigate who are our resources that can help us accomplish that? And then we have to actually start to design what are the steps that we would need to take to accomplish that. So once I knew that I wanted to get certified as a coach, then I looked at, okay, where can I get that certification? What does that look like? How long does it take? And it's been a 3-year journey for me. And in that journey, I've gone back to school. I've gotten my professional coaching education. I've become certified by the International Coach Federation, which is a governing body of coaches. I got my associate coaching certification, and I'm very close to getting my professional coaching designation, different levels of experience in the world. And I continued to take steps forward every day. And some days I couldn't see the vision so clearly. Some days I couldn't. And then ultimately, one of the big steps for me was to transition from my job to being able to full-time coach and be in the role of helping people full-time. And now I've been able to take that step. And so now I'm really starting to put new visions and new things into my future and designing those actions and action steps. Okay, so 2 things that we want to walk away with today. 1, what are the unhelpful stories that your mind has been telling you that you no longer want to operate by? And as we've done in the past here on this conversation, this broadcast, write those things down, and then, you know what? Throw it into the fire, burn it up, get rid of it. And then if your mind tries to bring it forward for you again, watch it come in and watch it go out and say, you know what? Honor that that used to be something I would do, but I no longer do that. Honor that. And then start to shape the beautiful new image and picture that you want to bring forward. Maybe that's a project that you're working on that you have a deadline to get accomplished for. Shape how is the ideal outcome of that project. Or maybe it's a complete life shift, as I've talked to you about that I experienced. But the cool thing is, you honor your own authenticity and happiness when you do those things. You honor you. And I can sit here today and say that I've honored my happiness and my authenticity. And it's a pretty cool space to be and operate from. And you can do the same. So as we wind down here, I want to know, what have you learned from this conversation today? What are you taking forward for the future? Leave a comment below. And if this conversation has been helpful for you and you have a friend that you think it might be helpful for, send them the link to this conversation. And if you would like to have some personal guidance on how to put these things into reality, well, that is the expertise of a coach. And I'd love to have a coaching conversation with you surrounding that. Okay, well, we're winding down another fireside chat. While we've talked, it's began to sprinkle a little bit here, and it's probably time for me to head inside. And I look forward to seeing you. Our next conversation will be the first Sunday in November at the same time. So thank you all for being here. And I'm going to go ahead now and end the live Facebook broadcast.